They did not pull away because they felt nothing for you. They pulled away because what they felt became too intense for them to manage. And the moment you stopped chasing them, something inside their inner world started unraveling quietly beneath the surface. Most people unknowingly drive emotionally avoidant individuals further into distance. But you did several rare things that reached parts of them they normally keep hidden from everyone. And now, no matter how much they try to appear detached, a part of them still cannot fully disconnect from you emotionally. If you have ever loved someone emotionally distant, ask yourself something honestly. Did they truly stop caring about you? Or did fear become stronger than their ability to express what they felt? Because the moment you stopped chasing them, the entire emotional dynamic changed in ways they never expected. Most people assume avoidants only feel relief when space is created. On the surface, that can appear true, but underneath that temporary sense of relief is usually something much more complicated: confusion, emotional restlessness, anxiety, and an uncomfortable silence they struggle to face within themselves. They are accustomed to people reacting emotionally when they pull away. They expect repeated messages, emotional confrontations, pressure for explanations, or desperate attempts to reconnect. That familiar pattern allows them to stay emotionally protected because the attention remains focused on the other person's reactions rather than their own unresolved fears. But when you chose not to chase them, you disrupted the emotional system they unconsciously depended on for protection. Your silence forced them into direct contact with emotions they normally avoid processing. And for someone emotionally avoidant, that can feel deeply destabilizing. Suddenly, there was no emotional noise distracting them anymore. No conflict, no pleading, no emotional chaos to shift their focus away from themselves. And in that silence, they began wondering why your absence felt heavier than your presence ever did. Without realizing it, they started replaying conversations in their mind, analyzing moments they once ignored, looking for hidden signs that you still cared, even while pretending to themselves that none of it affected them. But what unsettled them most was your emotional composure. You did not collapse emotionally when they created distance. You did not lose yourself trying to force connection or demand validation. Your calmness stayed intact. And that emotional balance became unforgettable to them because emotionally avoidant people secretly long for relationships that feel emotionally safe instead of emotionally chaotic. The more grounded you remained, the more they felt internally drawn back toward you. Your refusal to chase communicated something powerful without saying a single word. It showed them that your love came from emotional wholeness rather than dependency. And for someone who fears emotional captivity, that kind of energy becomes incredibly difficult to forget because it feels free, secure, and rare. But another thing affected them even more deeply. You saw through the version of themselves they showed everyone else. Emotionally avoidant people spend years building emotional armor so carefully that most people never notice what exists underneath. They hide vulnerability behind silence, independence, sarcasm, logic, emotional distance, or the appearance of being completely unaffected. To the outside world, they seem controlled and emotionally untouchable. But beneath that surface often exists someone carrying unresolved fear, loneliness, and an exhausting need to protect themselves from emotional exposure. Most people only react to the mask. Some become intimidated by the distance. Others become obsessed with trying to force emotional access through pressure or intensity. But you approached them differently. You noticed the contradictions they tried to hide. You sensed the hesitation behind their affection. You recognized the pattern of moving emotionally closer and then suddenly retreating without explanation. And instead of responding with judgment or emotional force, you understood that their inconsistency was connected to fear rather than a complete absence of feeling. That understanding affected them far more deeply than they admitted. Emotionally avoidant individuals are rarely understood correctly. and being truly seen is both deeply attractive and deeply terrifying for them at the same time. Part of them longs for someone to recognize the emotional world they hide beneath the surface. But another part fears that true emotional exposure will eventually lead to rejection, shame, or loss of control. So when you understood them without humiliating them for their defenses, it created a kind of emotional safety they were not prepared for. Around you, they began feeling emotionally exposed in ways they could not easily escape. And that is exactly why they continue thinking about you long after distance enters the connection. Your presence touched something beneath the identity they carefully constructed for survival. Even if they never fully admitted it aloud, they felt understood by you in a way that is incredibly rare in their life. And once someone reaches that hidden emotional part of them, forgetting becomes much harder than they expected. Another reason they became so deeply attached to you is because you gave them something they rarely experience in relationships: freedom without abandonment. Most emotionally avoidant people secretly fear that intimacy will eventually turn into control. Somewhere in their mind, love became associated with emotional pressure, expectations, dependency, or losing the ability to breathe freely as an individual. Usually, those fears were shaped by earlier experiences, where closeness felt overwhelming instead of emotionally safe. That is why the moment they sense possessiveness, emotional suffocation, or constant pressure, their instinct is to retreat before they feel trapped. But with you, the connection felt different. You loved them deeply, without making them feel emotionally owned. You gave them space without becoming cold or disconnected. You did not demand reassurance every time they became quiet or emotionally withdrawn. Instead of losing yourself inside the relationship, you maintained your own identity, emotional center, and sense of balance outside of them. And that affected them far more than they ever openly admitted. Avoidants secretly admire people who can love deeply without clinging desperately. Emotional independence feels safe to them because it removes the fear of being consumed by another person's emotional needs. When they realized your happiness did not completely depend on controlling their attention or forcing emotional closeness, something inside them slowly began relaxing. Defenses they normally keep locked in place started lowering around you. Your emotional steadiness allowed them to experience intimacy without automatically associating it with danger. And that experience stays with them long after the relationship changes. Eventually, they begin comparing new connections to the emotional freedom they felt with you. Most relationships start feeling either emotionally distant or emotionally demanding. But your energy existed somewhere rare in between. You offered closeness without pressure, affection without chains, understanding without emotional imprisonment. And for someone who has spent most of their life protecting themselves from feeling emotionally trapped, that kind of connection becomes nearly impossible to erase from memory. What made you unforgettable was your emotional consistency. Emotionally avoidant people are far more sensitive to instability than most realize. Even when they appear detached externally, internally they are constantly scanning relationships for signs of unpredictability, emotional pressure, conflict, or chaos. Because deep down, instability is what taught them to protect themselves in the first place. For many emotionally avoidant people, love never felt completely safe growing up. Connection often came mixed with tension, unpredictability, criticism, or emotional pressure. Because of that, they learned to survive by becoming emotionally guarded. Keeping distance became their way of staying in control whenever relationships started feeling unstable or overwhelming. Over time, emotional withdrawal stopped being a choice and became a reflex designed to protect them from disappointment. But something about your presence felt unfamiliar to them in a way they could not easily explain. You were not constantly shifting between affection and coldness to keep their attention. You did not create confusion through emotional games, manipulation, or passive-aggressive behavior. Even during moments when they became distant, difficult to read, or emotionally unavailable, you remained grounded instead of reacting impulsively. Your energy carried consistency, and consistency is something avoidants rarely experience in relationships. At first, they probably did not fully understand why being around you felt calming. Most avoidant people are disconnected from their deeper emotional needs, so they often fail to recognize when someone is genuinely regulating their nervous system in a healthy way. But slowly, your steady presence started lowering walls they had spent years building. Around you, they no longer felt the constant need to prepare for emotional conflict, guilt, or pressure. Your presence felt peaceful instead of demanding, and that emotional relief became far more meaningful than temporary attraction ever could. Emotionally distant people secretly long for stability because internal chaos already exhausts them. When someone consistently brings calmness into their life, the bond begins settling into places much deeper than surface-level chemistry. Even after distance grows between you, they continue replaying the emotional safety they felt around you. Once an avoidant connects a person to inner peace, their mind repeatedly returns to that feeling because it became a form of comfort they quietly depended on. Another reason they became so emotionally attached was because you never treated them like a project that needed fixing. Deep down, many avoidants carry shame about the way they struggle with closeness and vulnerability. They know they can be emotionally confusing, detached, or difficult to fully reach. Over time, many people respond to those behaviors with criticism, frustration, or constant pressure to change. Unfortunately, that only strengthens their defenses because it reinforces their hidden belief that love always comes with expectations they may never fully satisfy. But your approach felt different. Instead of trying to force emotional transformation, you gave them room to exist without constantly feeling judged. You listened without immediately trying to correct them. You noticed their contradictions without turning every difficult moment into a battle. That does not mean you tolerated unhealthy behavior forever, but your energy came from understanding instead of emotional control. And for someone who spends most of their life feeling psychologically misunderstood, that kind of acceptance becomes incredibly powerful. Avoidants often believe people only love the polished version of who they are. They fear their emotional distance, fears, and vulnerability make them hard to truly keep. So when they encounter someone who sees those imperfections without immediately withdrawing love, respect, or patience, something inside them begins to soften. Your acceptance slowly weakened the survival identity they built over the years. Around you, they no longer felt forced to constantly perform emotional perfection just to maintain connection. Ironically, your patience created more internal change than pressure ever could. Real emotional growth rarely happens through force or control. It happens when someone finally feels safe enough to stop hiding parts of themselves. Your calmness gave them moments where they could lower emotional armor without fearing humiliation or rejection. And once an avoidant associates you with relief from shame, detachment becomes much more difficult than they expected. Even after separation or emotional distance appears, they continue remembering how rare it felt to be accepted without being treated like a broken person that needed repair. But the moment that affected them most was not when you endlessly stayed. It was when you finally chose yourself with quiet dignity. Avoidants often assume the people who love them will continue waiting no matter how emotionally distant they become. Because they struggle to process emotions in real time, they frequently underestimate how deeply their behavior affects others. They convince themselves there will always be another opportunity to reconnect later, another chance to fix things eventually. But when you slowly stepped away without bitterness, chaos, or desperation, it unsettled them more deeply than they expected. You did not try to emotionally destroy them before leaving. You did not beg endlessly for attention or force them to stay. Instead, you reached a point where you recognized your own value and stopped sacrificing your emotional well-being for inconsistent love. That calm withdrawal impacted them far more than emotional drama ever could. For the first time, they were forced to face the possibility of permanently losing someone who genuinely understood them. And because avoidants often suppress emotions until distance creates clarity, the emotional weight arrived later and much more intensely. Your absence became louder than your presence had ever been. Suddenly, memories began resurfacing in unexpected moments. The way you listened without judgment, the patience you showed during their withdrawal, the emotional safety they quietly relied on without fully appreciating at the time. Slowly, they began realizing that what you offered was rare. And people rarely understand the value of rare things until they are gone. What truly haunts avoidance is not emotional chaos or dramatic endings. It is losing someone who loved them without control, yet still respected themselves enough to walk away when the relationship no longer honored their worth. Your dignity forced them to confront emotions they spent the entire relationship avoiding. And once that realization finally reaches them, many discover far too late that replacing your presence is much harder than losing it. Another reason avoidance falls so deeply is because you never rushed emotional intensity before trust had time to develop naturally. You did not demand instant vulnerability or pressure them into emotional exposure before they felt safe enough to open up. Instead, you allowed connection to grow gradually, without forcing intimacy before emotional security existed. And for someone who fears being emotionally consumed or overwhelmed, that patience creates a bond that feels incredibly rare. Most avoidants are used to relationships moving too fast emotionally. People often demand reassurance, closeness, and constant emotional access before trust has been fully built. That pressure makes avoidants retreat because it activates their fear of losing emotional freedom. But with you, the connection felt different. You gave closeness room to breathe. You allowed emotional trust to unfold naturally instead of forcing immediate intensity. And because of that, they felt safer lowering their guard around you than they had with most people in their past. That safety became unforgettable. Most people approach emotionally avoidant individuals with far too much intensity, far too quickly. They expect immediate openness, constant reassurance, and deep emotional vulnerability before trust has even had the chance to form naturally. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, that kind of pressure does not feel romantic. It feels overwhelming. Even when they genuinely care about someone, excessive emotional expectations can trigger internal panic instead of closeness. Their instinct is not always to move closer when emotions grow stronger. Often, it is to retreat before they feel emotionally trapped. But your approach to connection was different. You did not try to force the relationship into emotional intensity before safety existed. You allowed things to unfold naturally instead of trying to control the speed of intimacy. You understood something most people fail to recognize about avoidance. Trust is not built through dramatic emotional declarations or constant pressure for vulnerability. It develops slowly, through repeated experiences of emotional safety, calmness, consistency, and patience. That patience affected them far more deeply than you realized. Around you, they did not feel constantly pushed to expose every hidden wound or vulnerable part of themselves before they were ready. Your presence gave them emotional breathing room, and ironically, that freedom made their defenses lower faster on the inside. Avoidants are often drawn toward people who do not aggressively chase intimacy because it creates the feeling that connection is voluntary rather than emotionally forced. The less trapped they feel, the more emotionally curious they become. Slowly, your patience created something they rarely experience in relationships: trust without fear. Over time, they began associating your presence with emotional safety instead of emotional demand. And that feeling reached deeper parts of their psyche, where real attachment quietly forms. Even if they struggled to express it openly, they became emotionally connected to you in ways they later realized were difficult to break away from. That is why emotionally avoidant people often become unexpectedly attached to those who never tried to rush them. Your calmness communicated emotional maturity, self-control, and inner security. In a world where most people tried to force instant closeness, your willingness to let love evolve naturally made the bond feel authentic, peaceful, and unforgettable. But what truly made you impossible for them to forget was not only how you treated them while you were present, it was the emotional imprint you left behind after distance entered the connection. Avoidants rarely process the full meaning of emotions in real time. During relationships, they often rely on emotional detachment to convince themselves they are unaffected. But once the noise of interaction disappears and silence replaces connection, their emotional awareness slowly begins surfacing. And that is when everything they suppressed starts returning with painful clarity. In your absence, they did not find the emotional relief they expected. Instead, they found reflection. Suddenly, small moments started replaying in their mind without warning. Conversations that once seemed ordinary began carrying emotional significance. The way you responded calmly instead of reacting impulsively. The way you respected their need for space without emotionally abandoning them. The way you stayed emotionally grounded even during their periods of withdrawal. Those memories stopped feeling like simple recollections and became unresolved emotional experiences their mind kept revisiting. Avoidants often confuse emotional distance with emotional detachment. But absence has a way of revealing feelings that presence can hide. When you were no longer part of their daily life, there was nothing left distracting them from what your presence truly made them feel. And what you gave them was not chaos, emotional pressure, or control. You gave them a rare combination of peace, safety, understanding, and emotional depth. That realization rarely arrives in dramatic fashion. It develops slowly and quietly, almost painfully, as they begin comparing every new connection to the emotional environment you created. Other people may offer attention or attraction, but something feels different. Something important feels missing, even if they cannot fully explain why. What remains with them is not just your personality, it is how their emotional system responded to you. You became a reference point deep within their internal world, a standard their mind continues measuring future relationships against, even unconsciously. And this is why avoidants rarely move on in a perfectly straight line. Mentally and emotionally, they return to the person who made them feel both emotionally safe and genuinely understood. Again and again, their mind revisits the connection because experiences like that are rare for someone who has spent most of their life emotionally guarded. In the end, avoidant love is not a lack of emotion. It is the struggle of carrying deep emotions while simultaneously fearing them. They do not pull away because they feel nothing. Often, they pull away because what they feel touches wounds inside them they never fully healed. And when someone like you enters their life, someone who does not chase, manipulate, control, collapse emotionally, or demand emotional surrender, something unfamiliar begins happening inside them. For perhaps the first time, they experience love without pressure, connection without emotional captivity, presence without chaos. At first, they misunderstand it. They convince themselves distance will protect them. They believe silence will help them regain emotional control. But eventually, silence turns into reflection. Reflection turns into awareness, and awareness slowly becomes recognition. They begin realizing the person they walked away from was never trying to trap them emotionally. You were trying to understand them. You were not trying to possess them. You were trying to remain present while still respecting their emotional boundaries. And that realization creates an internal conflict they cannot easily escape. Because eventually, they understand that what they were running from was never truly you. It was the depth of what they felt while they were with you. What continues returning to them in memory is not emotional control or pressure. It is safety. It is peace. It is emotional freedom inside connection itself, something far rarer than intensity. But the deepest truth is this: your purpose was never to chase them into recognizing your value. Your role was to reveal your worth through your emotional balance, your self-respect, and your willingness to walk away without losing yourself. Because once someone experiences love that does not betray its own dignity, even an avoidant mind struggles to erase it completely. They may leave, they may resist, they may create distance, but they remember. And through that remembering, they eventually realize something profound. The rarest form of love is not the one that clings the hardest. It is the one that knows how to let go gracefully without ever losing its value. In the end, avoidants do not always walk away because they stopped loving. Sometimes they walk away because the connection touched parts of them they never learned how to handle. And when someone offers love with patience, emotional freedom, consistency, and self-respect, that experience leaves a permanent imprint on them. Your value was never in chasing them to stay. It was in showing them what safe, grounded love feels like. And once an avoidant experiences that kind of connection, they may resist it, run from it, or lose it, but they rarely forget it.